sleeping beauty. A long time ago there was a king and a queen who said every day, "Oh, if only we had a child," but never had one. One day, when the queen was bathing, a frog crept out of the water onto the land and spoke to her. "Your wish will be fulfilled. Before a year is up, you will give birth to a daughter." What the frog had said came true, and the queen gave birth to a girl who was so beautiful that the king could not contain his joy and organized a great feast. He not only invited his relatives, friends, and acquaintances, but also the wise women, so that they would be well disposed towards the child. There were 13 of them in his kingdom. However, he only had 12 golden plates for them to eat from, so one of them had to stay at home. The feast was celebrated with all manner of splendor, and when it was over, the wise women presented the child with their magic gifts. The first gave virtue, the second beauty, the third wealth, and so on, giving her everything that there is to be desired in the world. When 11 of them had bestowed their gifts, the 13th wise woman suddenly entered the hall. She wanted revenge for not having been invited, and without greeting or even looking at anyone, she announced in a loud voice, "When she is 15 years old, the princess will prick her finger on a spindle and die." And without saying another word, she turned around and left the hall. Everyone was horrified, and then the 12th wise woman, who still had to make her wish, stepped forwards. Because she could not lift the curse but only soften it, she said, "She shall not die, but fall asleep for 100 years. The king, who wanted to protect his dear child from the misfortune, gave the order that all the spindles in the entire kingdom were to be burnt. All the gifts bestowed by the wise women were fulfilled in the girl, who was so beautiful, modest, friendly, and intelligent that everyone who saw her had to love her. It so happened that one day, when she had just turned 15, the king and queen were not at home, and the girl was left all alone in the castle. She went all over the place, looking into whatever rooms and chambers she wanted to, and finally came to an old tower. She climbed up the narrow spiral staircase and arrived at a little door. In the lock there was a rusty key. When it turned, the door jumped open, and there, in a little room, was an old woman with a spindle, busily spinning flax. "Good day, old woman," said the princess. "What are you doing?" "I am spinning," said the old woman, nodding her head. "What is that thing that is jumping about so merrily?" asked the girl. And she took the spindle so that she could spin too. However, she had hardly touched the spindle when the curse was fulfilled, and she pricked her finger. As soon as she felt the prick, she fell onto the bed which was standing there and lay in a deep sleep. And this sleep spread throughout the castle. The king and the queen, who had just come home and had entered the hall, fell asleep, and so did the entire court. The horses in the stable, the dogs in the courtyard, the pigeons on the roof, and the flies on the wall all slept too. Even the fire which was flickering in the hearth became still and went to sleep. The roasting meat stopped sizzling, and the cook, who was about to pull the kitchen boy's hair because he had done something wrong, let him go and slept. And the wind subsided, and not a leaf moved on the trees outside the castle. Around the castle, however, a hedge of thorns began to grow. Every year it got higher, and finally it surrounded and grew over the entire castle, so that nothing could be seen of it, not even the flag on the roof. However, the story of the beautiful sleeping briar rose, for that was the name of the princess, went around the land, and from time to time princes came and tried to get through the hedge into the castle. But they did not manage this, as the thorns held together tightly, as if they had hands, and the young men stayed caught in them, were unable to break free, and died a miserable death. After many, many years, another prince came into the land and heard an old man tell of the hedge of thorns and how there was supposed to be a castle behind it, in which a beautiful princess called Briar Rose had already been asleep for 100 years, and how the king and queen and the whole court were sleeping with her. He had also heard from his grandfather that many princes had come and had attempted to get through the hedge of thorns, but had remained stuck in it and had died a tragic death. Then the young man said, "I'm not afraid. I want to go and see the beautiful Briar Rose, however much." The old man tried to advise him against it. He didn't listen to his words. Now, however, the 100 years had elapsed, and the day had come when Briar Rose was to wake up. When the prince approached the hedge of thorns, it was nothing but large and beautiful flowers which parted of their own accord and let him through unharmed, but then closed back into a hedge again behind him. In the castle courtyard, he saw the horses and spotted hunting dogs lying asleep. The pigeons were sitting on the roof with their heads under their wings, and when he went inside, the flies were sleeping on the wall. The cook in the kitchen still had his hand up as if he wanted to grab the boy, and the maid was sitting in front of the black chicken which was to be plucked. Then he went further and saw the whole court lying asleep in the hall, and the queen and the king lying near the throne. He went further, and everything was so quiet that he could hear his own breath. And finally he came to the tower and opened the door to the little room where Briar Rose was sleeping. There she lay, so beautiful that he could not take his eyes off her, and he bent down and gave her a kiss. As soon as he had touched her with his kiss, Briar Rose opened her eyes, woke up, and looked at him kindly. Then they went down the stairs together, and the king, the queen, and the whole court woke up and looked at one another in amazement. And the horses in the courtyard stood up and shook themselves. The hunting dogs jumped and wagged their tails. The pigeons on the roof took their heads out from under their wings, looked around, and flew into the field. The flies on the walls started crawling again. The roasting meat began to sizzle again. The cook boxed the boy's ear so hard that he screamed, and the maid finished plucking the chicken. Then the wedding of Briar Rose and the prince was celebrated with great splendor, and they lived happily ever after.